And in this channel, I have a saying. The more you dig into the past in search of gems of horror cinema, more you get positively shocked with what you find. And yes, the most recent gem that I have found comes straight from the 70s with the name House. Or as it was renamed in Japanese, not to be confused with another classic from the 80s, House, that one with William Katt as the protagonist. This one was called hausu, directed by Nobushiko Yobayashi from 1977. A director who didn't have any experience with features before hausu, but had directed many commercials with great visual flair and also with some impressive visual effects, that was called by the studio Toho, the same one from the Godzilla movies, to make a horror movie that would be a straight Japanese answer to an American horror classic called Jaws. But as a director that is a little bit crazy, or has a much more bold vision to his projects than any other director, Kobayashi created a piece that not only had nothing to do with the conventions of Jaws, but also elevated the category of insane movies to a whole new level. Not only for its time, but for now as well. And even for me that loves this kind of movies that are absolutely crazy, filled with absurd moments that basically just throw every single shit at the fan, or in this case, in the screen, I was shocked of how disoriented I was after the whole thing ended. So let's go. House from 1977. Can you imagine this? 77. Tells the story of 7 girls going to spend their summer vacation at a camp house of one of the girls' aunt, since the girl herself doesn't want to spend her holidays with her father that just announced that he's going to remarry a new woman. But during the stay in this aunt's house, she will end up discovering that this woman has some very sinister secrets that harkens back to her past. And not only that, but the house itself is possessed by something that until the end of the night is going to devour each one of these girls. And this is the main plot of the movie, that even though it looks simple, as the whole thing progresses, the story has nothing simple about its development. And besides some side characters, the movie takes place around these 7 girls that are named according to their personalities, just to make it more simple to remember each one of them. So we have Sweet, Melody, Mac, Prof, Fantasy, Kung Fu, and the main protagonist of the girls, Gorgeous. And the plot revolves around them and also the aunt of Gorgeous, that in this movie is also just called Aunt. But she is a pivotal character in the story because she is basically responsible for all the crazy shit that will happen to all these girls during the movie, especially the bizarre and most outlandish ways that all of them are going to be devoured by the house. And Hausu is not exactly a example of depth, but there are some layers of drama hidden in there, especially regarding the past story of Gorgeous Aunt that lost her husband to the war when she was a young woman the same age of the girls. And this takes back to the director Obayashi, who always inserts this level of drama linking back to the war because of his own trauma as a child for being a survivor of the Hiroshima bombing. But of course, here the center stage is to the acid trip that you as a viewer is going to have by each frame of the film that presents you with something new and creative. Right from the get-go, director Yobayashi makes it very clear that this is not a movie that will be told in a conventional fashion, because he really takes advantage of these frames that bring this idea of a dreamlike fantasy. It's all very colorful, filled with drawings and animations, using cutouts in the middle of the frame, with no regard for actual quality or perfectionism. It's all super trashy to really make you think, what the hell am I watching? And feel just like I did, disoriented. And I just love it. And different than any other horror movie, there's so much color in the beginning because it really relates to this whole element of the youth and purity in these girls. They are always laughing, cracking jokes, and they are very cute and charismatic. Even when they get to the aunt's house, they are very respectful and very helpful towards the lady. They are also very supportive between themselves in the group. So when things start to go south, they really use their own special abilities to deal with the whole chaos. For example, Kung Fu fights the flying objects in the house, while Prof tries to figure out what's going on and discover a way out of the situation. And of course, if you haven't figured out yet, all of this is done with extreme humor and pure trashiness, with the real intention of being this irreverent horror movie. Because the original idea for hausu came actually from the imagination of a child. Director Obayashi actually asked his young daughter to tell him the fears that she had as a child, to help him write the script. This is why this movie has a complete freedom in going towards the absurd, the bizarre, that an unlimited mind like the one of a child, for example, can have to convey this kind of story. So all the sinister things that happen during the whole picture actually come from this childish mentality. For example, a scary lamp that devours the head of one of them, or the piano keys that devour the hands of another. And one fear that I myself shared as a child, that it is this deep well in the garden. Every child has the fear of falling into a well in the garden, or a hole in the floor, or whatever. I myself as a child, if I heard that there was some kind of hole in the street near my house, I already imagined myself falling into it and disappearing forever to never see my family again. And this creates one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, where we have our dear Mac having her head removed from the well as if it was a watermelon, because the Japanese have this kind of technique of putting a watermelon into a well of water to keep it frozen if they don't have a refrigerator. And as a great absurd horror movie that this is, it makes the decapitated head fly in the air and bite the other girl in the ass. Why not? And this is just the beginning of the craziness that is thrown upon the spectator every moment and every scene. Hilarious, disgusting, insane moments, becoming such a frenetic experience that it's impossible to figure out where the whole thing is gonna take you. And this is exactly the kind of movie that I love with a passion. There's no one dull moment where the camera, the editing, the visuals are not throwing something on your lap to hook you up and surprise you every second. And this style of direction and everything links back to another great classic of horror movies, probably one of the best movies ever made in this world, Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. But here comes the catch, because hausu came way before Evil Dead 2. In fact, it even came before Evil Dead 1. So this begs the question if Sam Raimi himself didn't get the inspiration of the visual flair and style from Mobayashi in hausu. And of course, I know this is not a style of horror movie for everyone. Most people will think this is much more of a comedy than a horror movie, and it probably is. But this is exactly the point, because the fascinating things of hausu are the things that someone with my taste really appreciates. This absurd creativity displayed in every frame, using the most rustic visual effects and camera tricks to create something new and different at every second. Another great example of this comes from Hong Kong, that I also recently watched and really loved, called The Devil's Fetus from 1983. This one has a more linear story and also a more conventional plot, but just a little, because it also displays a lot of trashy, bizarre visual effects to create absurd moments, even with sword fights and kung fu used to fight ghosts. All that combined with great editing and directing style. If you haven't watched yet, I highly recommend as well. What else can I say about hausu? Well, besides the fact that this was meant to be a straight, serious horror movie, and then the director completely subverted the whole idea, he actually invited actresses that were not exactly professional actresses. They were actually models that he had worked before in his commercials. But all of them do an excellent job, again showing that this is a director of vision that didn't really care for acting prestige and more about who really fit those personalities of the characters in a perfect way. Look, it's an incredible movie. I am really in love with it. He might have some little issues, like for example, there is a piano soundtrack that is meant for the character Gorgeous in the movie that plays too many times during the picture's length, and that can really annoy you at some point. But this is just a minor issue, because what really matters is this surreal and amazing trip that the movie provides, that, just like I said before, if it was created or written by an adult, it would probably be completely stuck in what an adult thinks other adults find it scary. And we all know that as adults, our minds become more and more limited because of the conventions of our raising and the lack of freedom of thoughts and imagination that only a child with its youth and purity can have. And this is it, Hausu from 1977. What do you think? Have you ever watched it? Comment below. And if you are liking the content of Trashing with Gus, and you want us to continue trashing with great examples of movies just like Hausu, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like so we can keep trashing forever, alright? See you in the next trashing video, and bye bye.